It's the new Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. There's a lot to like, but I do have some complaints about it, and that's a real shame. So let's dive into my full take of the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. A phone that I really like. When it comes to the main camera and to 48mm and the ultra wide, I really do. But there are some things that it really needs to work on to really make that improvement compared to the previous generation of it. Anyway, let's dive into the video. So I'm going to do a voiceover for a better audio experience and a better concise narration about my opinion about this Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. There's a nuance to it. There's a much bigger story to tell when it comes to the changes that we've seen for the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6, beginning with the new design being wider and less tall. With that, I have zero problems. It feels still comfortable in the hand and brings the top of the phone down a little bit, so it's a tad easier to reach the top of it. And then not to mention, we still have the micro SD support, we still have the camera shutter button, we still have a 3.5mm headphone jack, which is something that I love about Sony. Sticking to their guts and allowing you to have that proper experience. This is what we need on all phones, for my opinion. Then we come to hardware. Of course, we have the stacked main sensor, and this is one of the best to have combined with Sony, especially when it comes to the pictures itself. I like the feel, I like the way it captures the shots naturally, and even after cropping it for 48mm, the results I'm getting are solid, giving me the right feel of the shot without feeling like a sacrifice. However, start zooming in, and this is where I'm not really sold on it. I really like the idea behind the periscope, having different focal lengths within that periscope, and I want others to do the same. That being said, like last time, I was critical about the zoom lens, because the quality was lacking compared to a lot of other phones, and that was because of the smaller sensor. I was hoping we would get a good sensor size increase to combat what really makes this technology works wonders that I believe it can. I seriously do wonder if they listened to MKB HD for this, and if they did, I'm sorry, but this is not the right step for Sony to take, because while he's a nice guy, he never uses the Sony the way it's supposed to be used, and never gets the result and showcases the result that you can get out of a phone like this. I'd rather have it that they listen to a guy like Ollie Nielsen, for instance, a person that loves photography and knows what they are doing with it. Heck, I would say use the guy that you have on your team, David, who's a really good photographer, and use him to take shots on a Sony, because he would know what to do when it comes to using a camera like that. So you might be wondering, why am I so critical about the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6, but also like it to a degree? Simply put, when it comes to that zoom lens, I like the idea behind it. Just don't necessarily like the result behind it. It's not always very nice, especially if it comes to flower shots, telemacro. That's just inconsistent and not very nice. So that's something I have to take into account. That being said, I don't know if I like the camera better. Sure, there are some advancements. When it comes to auto capture, I think it does better than the previous generation. And I know that it will be better for a lot of normal people. But I'm just not sure if I like it better. Especially when it comes to the videography. I really like that separate app. A lot of controls. And I miss that. And while being critical is important for me, because at the end this is a passion for me. And like stated, I love Sony to do well. Because when it comes to it, they understand the needs for it. They understand what you should give a photographer. And I know some will say, well, then get a camera, and that's all nice and handy. But a camera is a bulk, you need different lenses. And a phone has everything within a small package. So that argument never made sense to me. Yes, a phone can never compete with a proper camera. But there's a saying, the best camera you have is the one that you have with you. And I agree. But why wouldn't you want that one to be better? For me, the joy of shooting with Sony is still very much there. I've been to different locations shooting different subjects, and there Sony delivers most of the time great results. Though I feel like I'm limited to using the ultra wide and max cropping into the 48mm on the main sensor if the situation isn't in ideal lighting. When it comes to ideal lighting, or at least good lighting, yes, Sony will still deliver pretty nice shots with their periscope, including some shots that I've taken here at the Openlucht Museum. That feel and love that I have for Sony is still there with the results that I'm getting with the periscope if lighting is well. Don't get me wrong, me being critical doesn't mean this isn't a great device, and it isn't that you cannot get the best out of the shots, but it's coming from someone who wants Sony to push that technology, use their own better sensors that they are giving to the competitors, but weirdly enough, not using it themselves. And I really want to highlight that me being critical doesn't mean that the pictures I've created by this Sony are bad by any means. Most of the time you will do well, even more so if you love editing, playing around with different styles that I've used in this Openlucht Museum, where I've been using nostalgic for some of the shots to create that feel that works really well here. And they have some of the best styles on there that don't feel like an Instagram filter and feel properly integrated. And shots using nostalgic, for instance here, make a lot of sense because of the time that you are capturing here within that museum, including using a bit of portrait to cheat and give some depth of field, where of course normally you wouldn't get that on a small sensor like this. And low light, we can also shortly discuss that, and in general Sony does pretty well in retaining that feel that you want in low light photography. I'm talking about proper photography where it retains the feel of the night, not the brightness of the day in a low light shot, so you can share it on your social media. Now this is from a perspective of proper photography and retaining that feel in the night itself that is so important for low light photography. Just don't expect much from the periscope in anything but pretty ideal situations. At the end, Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6 is one of the hardest reviews that I've had to make, because I get so much conflicting feelings from it. When it comes to the main camera, when it comes to the ultra wide, it provides a picture that is really nice. When it comes to having the micro SD support, that I love. Having a 3.5mm headphone jack on it on top as well is something that I love, because simply put, I don't necessarily like Bluetooth. Yes, it's the only option that I have for a lot of phones, but I prefer my cabled, because that gives better audio quality. And then we have to discuss the one thing that I feel like is holding back this phone. The periscope. Yes, the periscope is really nice in terms of the idea and implication of it. It just misses out on it by having such a small sensor for it. I feel like there definitely the limitations of it are noticeable, and I think that is something that Sony needs to work on. The technology behind it is amazing. The implication of it is amazing. It's just held back by the sensor size of it. And honestly, for a phone that is so focused on photography, I feel like they limit it so much with the sensors that you have inside of it. The processing that they do for it is amazing. But I think for the next generation for Sony, if they make it that you get a much larger sensor for the main sensor, a much larger sensor for the periscope, and a larger sensor for the ultra wide as well, Sony's gonna be one of the best, if not the best provider for photography, especially for those who love it. That being said, I do want them to bring back the applications that we know from them. Having those manual controls properly there, especially for the videography, is something that I feel like is a must for a phone like this, for a specialist phone like this. No, with this phone they're aiming more for the normal audience. But realistically, are you still gonna go in that segment if most of the time people already look at Google for the ease of use, to Samsung, to Apple and so on? I'm not sure about that one. I feel like if you want to be a specialist, properly engage with that and give me those things that I really want on a phone like this, because that would be amazing when it comes to a Sony. Either way, what do you think about the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6? I have mixed messages, and if I use the main sensor and crop into 48mm, it's one of the best out there. If I go a little bit further than that, it sadly isn't. Either way, let me know your opinion about it. Let me know what you think about the video. Do you think this more concise video where I put a narration on top of it, showcasing what the capabilities are and how I capture my shots on the Sony, is a benefit or not? Do you like it more if I give a narration while shooting the shot itself? Let me know in the comments below. Either way, if you aren't subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe and do all that stuff. And talk to you guys in the next.